The night the letter arrived, the rain was pouring down. It wasn't the gentle patter that lulls you to sleep, but the kind that hammers against your windows like desperate fists. I remember the kitchen table, bills spread out before me, the red final notice stamp seeming to glow under my flickering light. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, precise, and measured raps. When I opened the door, there was only a drenched envelope on my welcome mat. No footprints led away, despite the mud that had formed in my front yard. Just pristine, expensive stationery, gradually darkening from the rain. I'm Thomas Blackwood, by the way. At least, that's who I was 7 months ago. Back when I had a studio apartment I could barely afford, a dead-end job at an accounting firm, and a life that felt like it was slipping through my fingers one missed payment at a time. The letter changed everything, or so I thought. Dear Mr. Blackwood, it began in elegant, flowing script. It is our solemn duty to inform you of the passing of Elias Blackwood, your great-uncle, and to convey that you are the sole surviving heir to the Blackwood estate. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. Great-uncle. I'd never heard of an Elias Blackwood. My family tree had always been more of a family stump. It was just me and my parents, who died in a car accident when I was 19. No siblings, no extended family, at least none that ever made themselves known. The letter continued, explaining that Elias had been the last of a once prominent family, living in isolation at the ancestral home, Blackwood Manor, for decades. Now, everything was mine. The house, the grounds, and what the letter described as considerable assets. At the bottom was a phone number. When I called, a crisp, professional voice belonging to a Mr. Hammond of Hammond & Wells solicitors confirmed everything. Documents would be couriered to me the following day. All I needed to do was sign and return them, then travel to Blackwood Manor to fulfill the terms of inheritance. What terms? I asked. Simply that you must reside in the house for a minimum of 3 nights to claim your inheritance, Mr. Blackwood, Mr. Hammond replied. A formality, really. The late Mr. Blackwood was particular about family connection to the estate. 3 nights in a mansion in exchange for financial security. It seemed too good to be true. It was. The drive to Blackwood Manor took nearly 6 hours, most of it along winding country roads that grew narrower and more neglected the further I traveled. My GPS lost signal about an hour before I reached my destination, but the solicitor's directions were precise. When I finally turned onto the long gravel driveway, the sun was already setting, casting long shadows across the overgrown grounds. And there it was, Blackwood Manor, rising from the darkening landscape like something from another time. It wasn't what I expected, not a crumbling Gothic mansion, but something more subtle in its wrongness. 3 stories of solid Victorian architecture with large windows and a sweeping porch. Yet, there was something off about the proportions. The way some windows seemed slightly larger than others, or how the roof line didn't quite follow the rules of perspective as I approached. I parked my car and sat there for a moment, taking it all in. The property was isolated, surrounded by dense woods on 3 sides, and what looked like a lake behind it, visible only as a glimmer through the trees. No neighboring houses were in sight, just wilderness and silence. Mr. Hammond had told me a caretaker would meet me. But as I stepped out of my car, the house stood dark and still. No welcoming lights, no waiting figure, just the crunch of gravel under my feet and the faint sound of wind through the trees. I checked my phone. No signal, as expected out here in the middle of nowhere. I grabbed my overnight bag from the trunk, I'd only packed for the required 3 nights, and approached the front door. It opened before I reached it. Hello. I called out, hesitating at the threshold. No response. The door had swung inward silently, revealing a dimly lit foyer. I told myself it was just the wind. Or perhaps the caretaker had seen me arrive and opened it remotely somehow. Reasonable explanations exist for most things, right? I stepped inside, and that's when I first felt it. A subtle resistance, as if the air itself had thickened around me, just for a moment, barely noticeable. Then it was gone, and I was standing in the entrance hall of my new home. "Hello?" I called again. "Mr. Fletcher." That was the caretaker's name, according to Hammond. Still nothing. The foyer opened into a grand hall with a sweeping staircase. Despite the exterior's relatively modest appearance, the inside was cavernous, with high ceilings and dark wood paneling. Antique furniture dotted the space, all immaculately preserved under thin layers of dust. The air smelled of old books and furniture polish, with an underlying mustiness that all old houses seem to have. I set my bag down and noticed an envelope on a side table near the door, addressed to me in the same elegant handwriting as the original letter. Inside was a note from the caretaker. "Mr. Blackwood, welcome to your ancestral home. I've prepared the master bedroom for your stay and stocked the kitchen. Unfortunately, urgent business has called me away, but I shall return on the 4th day to assist with whatever you decide regarding the estate. The house is yours to explore. Just remember, all houses have their quirks. Blackwood Manor more than most. Respectfully, Edward Fletcher." Great. So much for the welcome wagon. I explored the ground floor first. A formal dining room with a table that could seat 20. A parlor frozen in Victorian elegance. A surprisingly modern kitchen, renovated perhaps in the 1980s by the look of the appliances. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a study with a massive oak desk. Everything was clean, but had that unlived-in quality, like a museum after hours. My footsteps echoed no matter how softly I tried to walk. The sun had fully set by then, and I found myself flipping on lights as I went. The electricity worked, which was one small comfort, as was the running water I discovered when I checked the kitchen sink. I was hungry after the long drive, so I investigated the refrigerator. True to his word, the caretaker had stocked it. Fresh vegetables, eggs, milk, several prepared meals in containers with reheating instructions taped to them. There was even a bottle of good whiskey on the counter with a note, "For the evenings. They can be long here." That should have been my first real warning. I heated one of the meals, a surprisingly excellent beef stew, and took it to the library along with a generous pour of whiskey. Something about eating in that massive dining room alone felt too depressing. The library was the most welcoming room so far, with comfortable leather chairs and books that ranged from ancient-looking tomes to more modern fiction. A fireplace dominated one wall, already laid with logs and kindling. All it needed was a match, which I found in a small box on the mantel. As the fire caught and filled the room with warm light, I felt myself relaxing for the first time since arriving. The food was good, the whiskey better, and the crackling fire created an almost cozy atmosphere. I even found myself smiling as I looked around at the book collection. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. 3 nights in comfort, then a decision about whether to keep or sell the place. After dinner, I decided to check out the upper floors and find this master bedroom that had been prepared for me. The main staircase creaked underfoot, each step announcing my ascent as if the house were keeping track of my movements. The second floor held several bedrooms, all furnished but with sheets covering most of the furniture. I peeked under a few, more antiques, all valuable looking. One room appeared to be a music room with a dust-covered grand piano as its centerpiece. Another seemed to be a lady's sitting room with a delicate writing desk by the window and faded floral wallpaper. At the end of the main hallway, I found double doors that opened into what had to be the master suite. Unlike the other rooms, this one showed signs of recent attention. The massive 4-poster bed was made up with fresh linens. Towels were laid out on a bench at the foot, and an electric space heater hummed quietly in the corner, taking the chill out of the room. My bag had been placed at the foot of the bed. I froze, staring at it. I had left my bag downstairs in the foyer. I was certain of it. Yet here it was. "Hello." I called out, louder this time. "Is someone here?" "Mr. Fletcher." Nothing but the creaking of the old house as it settled. I told myself there must be an explanation. Perhaps the caretaker had still been here when I arrived but had to leave suddenly. Maybe he'd seen me drive up and brought my bag upstairs before departing. It didn't feel right, but it was the only explanation that didn't send a chill down my spine. The adjoining bathroom had been modernized more recently than the kitchen, with a large clawfoot tub and separate shower. The hot water worked, which decided matters for me. I took a long shower, trying to wash away the unease that had settled over me. By the time I emerged, wrapped in one of the plush towels provided, I felt more rational. Old houses play tricks on the mind. Everyone knows that. Unfamiliar sounds, settling foundations, drafts that move things when you're not looking, all explainable phenomena. I changed into sleep clothes and decided to do a bit of reading before bed. The bedside table held several books, apparently selected for my stay. One caught my eye, The Blackwood Family History. Perfect evening reading for the newly discovered heir. I opened it and began to read about my apparent ancestors. The Blackwoods had come to America in the late 1700s, already wealthy from shipping and banking interests in England. They'd established themselves quickly, building this house in 1842. The family had been prominent locally, with mentions of various business ventures, political connections, and social events. But as I read further, I noticed something odd. The family tree showed numerous branches with many children in each generation until about 100 years ago. Then, suddenly, the branches began to wither. Children died young. Family members moved away and lost contact. Marriages produced no heirs. And there was something else strange. No mention of how any of these later Blackwoods died. Just dates, growing fewer with each generation, until only Elias remained. And now me, apparently, though I couldn't find where exactly I connected to this family. I set the book aside, my eyes growing heavy. Questions for another day. I switched off the lamp and lay back in the surprisingly comfortable bed. That's when I noticed the ceiling. In the darkness, with only moonlight filtering through the curtains, I could make out what appeared to be a pattern carved into the ceiling above the bed. Not decorative plasterwork, which would have been period appropriate, but something more deliberate. It almost looked like writing, but in no alphabet I recognized. I reached for the lamp switch, but as my hand touched it, the pattern seemed to shift just slightly, just enough that when the light came back on, the ceiling was plain. No carvings, no writing, just ordinary plaster with a few age cracks. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. Nothing changed. The ceiling remained ordinary. Just tired, I muttered to myself, switching the lamp off again. This time I didn't look up, just turned on my side and closed my eyes. I don't know how long I slept before the first dream came. In it, I was wandering the halls of Blackwood Manor, but they stretched endlessly, turning back on themselves in impossible ways. All the while, I could hear whispering coming from behind the walls. Not threatening exactly, but urgent, like they were trying to tell me something important. If only I could understand their language. I woke with a start, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. The bedside clock read 3:17 a.m. The witching hour, as my mother used to call it. The thought came unbidden, along with a memory of her telling me that 3 a.m. was when the veil between worlds was thinnest. I lay there, fully awake now, listening to the house. There was a rhythm to its sounds. The tick of what must be a grandfather clock somewhere downstairs. The occasional groan of timber. The whisper of wind around the eaves. Wait, not wind. I sat up slowly, straining to hear. There it was again, a sound like whispering, just at the edge of audibility, coming from the walls. I got out of bed and pressed my ear against the wallpaper. Nothing. I moved to another wall. Still nothing. Then the bathroom door. And there it was, faint but unmistakable. Words being spoken in hushed tones, too quiet to make out. My first thought was pipes. Old houses have noisy plumbing that can sometimes sound like voices. I opened the bathroom door slowly. The whispering stopped instantly. The bathroom was exactly as I'd left it, lit dimly by a small night light plugged into an outlet. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. "Hello?" I said softly, feeling foolish. No response, of course, just the drip of a faucet I hadn't fully closed. I used the facilities quickly, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. When I returned to bed, sleep seemed very far away. I must have drifted off eventually because the next thing I knew, daylight was streaming through a gap in the curtains. The room looked different in the light of day, less imposing, more simply a well-appointed, if old-fashioned, bedroom. I checked my phone, still no signal, and it was nearly 10 a.m. I'd slept later than intended. Time to explore the house properly and maybe find some answers about my supposed connection to the Blackwood family. After a quick shower and change of clothes, I headed downstairs. In the kitchen, I found coffee already brewed in the pot, still hot. I stared at it, that now familiar unease returning. Had I sleepwalked down here and made coffee without remembering? I didn't think I'd ever sleepwalked before, but stress does strange things to people. Or had the caretaker returned without announcing himself? "Mr. Fletcher?" I called out. "Are you here?" Nothing. I poured myself a cup of the coffee. It was excellent. And made some toast from bread I found in a bread box. As I ate, I planned my day. First, a thorough exploration of the house, including any rooms I hadn't checked last night. Then, the grounds, time permitting. I was also determined to find some documentation that explained exactly how I was related to the Blackwoods. The house revealed itself slowly throughout the morning. Besides the rooms I'd already discovered, I found a conservatory with long-dead plants still in their pots, a small chapel-like room with pews for perhaps a dozen people, and several more bedrooms, each with its own distinct character. What I didn't find were any personal effects that would tell me more about the recent inhabitants. No photo albums, no letters, no diaries. It was as if someone had systematically removed anything that might give insight into the lives of the people who had lived here. The third floor was different from the rest of the house. Less grand, with narrower hallways and smaller rooms that had clearly been servants' quarters at one time. Most were empty now, stripped down to bare essentials. All except one. At the very end of the hallway, past what looked like it had once been a nursery, I found a door that was locked. The only locked door I'd encountered so far. I rattled the handle, more out of frustration than expectation, and was about to turn away when I noticed something odd about the keyhole. It seemed to be leaking. A dark substance, viscous and slow-moving, was seeping out of the keyhole and down the door in a thin line. I touched it cautiously. It was warm and had the metallic smell of blood. I jerked my hand back, heart suddenly pounding. The substance had vanished. The keyhole was normal, the door clean. I blinked hard, wondering if lack of sleep was causing me to hallucinate. Deciding I'd had enough of the third floor, I headed back downstairs, wiping my fingers compulsively on my jeans, even though there was nothing on them. In the study on the ground floor, I finally found what I was looking for, a desk drawer containing recent documents. Most were financial records showing that Elias Blackwood had been wealthy indeed, with investments and accounts that totaled well into 8 figures. There were also property documents for Blackwood Manor showing taxes paid and maintenance expenses, but nothing that explained my connection to the family. I was about to give up when I noticed a small leather-bound journal tucked at the back of the drawer. It was newer than the furnishings of the house, perhaps from the 1990s by its appearance. When I opened it, I found it was Elias's personal diary. Most entries were brief and mundane. Notes about the weather, maintenance needs for the house, occasional visits from the caretaker. But one caught my eye. Dated just 6 months before his death. Another branch withers. Jonathan's boy died yesterday. Car accident. They say that makes him the last, apart from Thomas. And Jonathan doesn't even know about the boy. Perhaps it's better that way. The house has chosen, I think. It always does. Jonathan, that was my father's name. And Thomas, me. This had to be referring to us. But what did it mean? My father didn't know about me. He and my mother had raised me until their deaths when I was 19. And what did Elias mean, the house has chosen? I flipped forward, looking for more entries that might mention me or my parents. There was nothing until the final entry, dated 3 days before Elias's death, according to the documents I'd received. It's coming for me now. I can feel it. The walls are whispering more loudly each night. The patterns on the ceiling no longer hide themselves. Thomas will come after me. The solicitors will see to that. The last Blackwood. I should feel guilty about what awaits him, but the house must have its due. Better him than me, for whatever time remains. I closed the journal, a chill running through me despite the warm day. This was nonsense, surely. The ramblings of an old man, perhaps suffering from dementia or some other condition that caused paranoia and delusions. Yet, the whispering I'd heard last night, the pattern on the ceiling that disappeared when I looked directly at it, the locked door with its momentary illusion of bleeding. No, I was letting the atmosphere of this place get to me. There would be rational explanations for everything. I decided to get some fresh air and explore the grounds. Maybe distance from the house would help clear my head. Outside, the day was pleasant, warm but not hot, with a light breeze rustling the trees that surrounded the property. I walked the perimeter of the house first, noting the well-maintained stonework, and the way the architecture seemed to shift subtly depending on the angle from which I viewed it. Behind the house, a carefully planned garden had gone wild with neglect, roses and other flowering plants growing in tangled profusion. Beyond that, a path led down toward what I'd glimpsed the previous evening, a small lake, its surface glittering in the midday sun. As I approached the water's edge, I noticed something odd about my reflection. It seemed delayed. When I moved my arm, the reflection followed a split second later. I told myself it was just the rippling of the water distorting things. Then my reflection smiled at me. I hadn't smiled. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. When I looked again, my reflection was normal, mimicking my startled expression perfectly. "Get a grip, Thomas," I muttered to myself. Lack of sleep, an unfamiliar environment, and reading that disturbing diary entry were clearly affecting me. I decided to walk the perimeter of the lake to settle my nerves. It wasn't large, perhaps a quarter mile across, but something about it felt unnatural. Too perfectly circular, the banks too evenly sloped, like it had been deliberately created rather than formed by nature. Halfway around, I came across a small dock with a rowboat tied to it. The boat looked well maintained, its red paint bright against the dark water. Someone had been using it recently. Beyond the lake, the trees grew more densely, forming what looked like old-growth forest. No paths led into it that I could see, and something about the shadows between those ancient trunks discouraged exploration. I completed my circuit of the lake and headed back toward the house. It was mid-afternoon by then, and I realized I was hungry. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. As I approached Blackwood Manor, I was struck again by how the proportions seemed subtly wrong. The windows on the third floor seemed closer together than they had this morning. The angle of the roof looked steeper, but when I blinked and looked more carefully, everything appeared normal. Back in the kitchen, I found a note on the counter that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Blackwood, I've prepared lunch for you in the dining room. Please make yourself comfortable. I'll return tomorrow as planned. E.F." The caretaker had been here while I was out. Why hadn't he waited to meet me? In the dining room, a place had indeed been set at the head of the long table. Under a silver dome was a chicken salad sandwich, a small bowl of soup, and a glass of iced tea. All fresh, the ice in the tea not yet melted. I ate alone in that cavernous room, trying to ignore the feeling that I was being watched. The sandwich was excellent, the soup, some kind of creamy vegetable blend, tasted homemade. Whoever Edward Fletcher was, he was a good cook. After lunch, I returned to the study, determined to find more information about my supposed family connection. I spent hours going through papers but found nothing more revealing than the diary entries I'd already discovered. Eventually, frustrated, I decided to try a different approach. If the house had a landline phone, perhaps I could call the solicitor directly and demand answers. I found an old rotary phone in a small alcove off the main hall. Surprisingly, it had a dial tone. I pulled out the business card Hammond had given me and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a click as someone picked up. "Hammond and Wells, how may I direct your call?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "This is Thomas Blackwood. I need to speak with Mr. Hammond urgently." "One moment, please." There was a series of clicks. Then Hammond's voice came on the line. "Mr. Blackwood, I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Is everything all right at the estate?" "Mr. Hammond, I need some straight answers. I've been going through the house all day, and I found a diary that suggests I'm related to the Blackwoods, but I don't understand how. My parents were Jonathan and Marie Blackwood, but according to what I've read, my father shouldn't have even known about me. What's going on here?" There was a long pause. When Hammond spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming more careful. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm not at liberty to discuss certain aspects of your family history. The terms of your great-uncles were very specific. You are to spend 3 nights in Blackwood Manor. After that, all will be explained." "That's not good enough. I'm experiencing strange things here. The house feels wrong somehow. And this caretaker, Fletcher, he leaves notes but won't show himself. I want answers now, or I'm leaving." Another pause. "Then, I wouldn't recommend leaving before the 3 nights are complete, Mr. Blackwood. There could be complications with your inheritance." "What kind of complications?" "Legal matters. Complex ones. Please, just complete the 3-night stay as required. Fletcher will return tomorrow, and he can answer many of your questions. He's been with the Blackwood family for a very long time." I wanted to press further, but something in Hammond's tone suggested it would be futile. "Fine. But I expect full disclosure after the 3rd night." "Of course. That was always the arrangement. Good day, Mr. Blackwood." The line went dead before I could respond. I replaced the receiver, more frustrated than before. What was so important about staying 3 nights? And what did Hammond mean? Fletcher had been with the family a very long time. The caretaker's note had been written in a young, steady hand, not that of an elderly retainer. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly as I continued exploring the house. I found a small home theater in what had once been a billiard room, with a surprisingly modern projection system and comfortable seating. There was even a collection of films, mostly classics from the 1930s through the 1960s. As evening approached, I decided to distract myself with one of these films and a meal from the well-stocked kitchen. I made pasta with a Jared sauce I found in the pantry, adding some fresh vegetables to make it more substantial. I took my dinner to the theater room and selected The Uninvited, a 1944 ghost story that seemed ironically appropriate. As the film played, I found myself relaxing despite my earlier unease. The pasta was good, and I'd found another bottle of excellent whiskey to accompany it. By the time the film ended, it was fully dark outside. The house had grown quiet, except for its usual settling noises. I considered watching another movie but decided instead to return to the library and continue reading the family history I'd started the night before. The library was dark when I entered. The fire from the previous evening long gone. I flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. Power outage? But the lights in the hallway had been working. I was about to leave and find a flashlight when I noticed a faint glow coming from the fireplace. Embers still alive from yesterday? I approached cautiously. The glow wasn't coming from the hearth itself, but from the large mirror hanging above it. In the darkness, it seemed to emit a soft, pulsing light, like moonlight filtered through water. And in its reflection, the library wasn't empty. A figure stood behind me, tall, thin, dressed in what looked like clothing from another century. I spun around, heart racing. Nothing. The room was empty except for me. When I looked back at the mirror, the figure was gone from there, too. The mirror was just a mirror again, reflecting the dark room and my pale face. I backed out of the library, found my way to the kitchen, and located a flashlight in a drawer. Returning to the library with it, I found the light switch now worked perfectly, illuminating the room as if nothing had happened. The mirror above the fireplace reflected only the room and me, looking shaken. I made a fresh fire, poured a generous whiskey, and tried to calm my nerves. I was tired, suggestible, and in an old house full of drafts and strange acoustics. Of course I was experiencing odd things. Still, I couldn't bring myself to pick up the Blackwood family history again. Instead, I found a collection of Sherlock Holmes stories and lost myself in their rational, logical world until my eyelids grew heavy. I must have dozed off in the chair because the next thing I knew, I was waking with a stiff neck. The fire had burned down to embers, and the grandfather clock in the hall was chiming midnight. I decided to head up to bed properly. As I climbed the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the house. The layout seemed subtly different. Hallways a few feet longer than I remembered. Doorways not quite where they should be. When I reached the second-floor landing, I paused, disoriented. Which way to the master bedroom? I'd been certain it was to the right, but now the hallway stretched left instead, with no passage visible to the right at all. I turned left, walking slowly, checking doors as I went. None were the master suite I'd slept in the previous night, just more guest bedrooms, all with furniture draped in sheets. At the end of the hall, a narrow staircase led up to the third floor, presumably, but I didn't remember the staircase being here. I'd accessed the third floor earlier from the main stairs. I turned back, determined to retrace my steps to the landing and try again. But the landing wasn't there anymore. Just more hallway stretching into shadow. This isn't happening, I said aloud, my voice sounding muffled, as if the air itself were absorbing the sound. I'm dreaming. I fell asleep in the library, and I'm dreaming. But it felt real. The solid floor beneath my feet, the texture of the wallpaper when I reached out to touch it, the slight chill in the air, all tangible, present. I kept walking, hoping to find my way back to familiar territory. The hallway seemed endless, doors on either side identical to each other. I tried a few, all locked. Then ahead, I saw a door standing slightly ajar, light spilling out from within. I approached cautiously, pushed it open wider. It was the master bedroom. My bedroom, exactly as I'd left it that morning. Relief flooded through me. I stepped inside, closed the door firmly behind me, and leaned against it, breathing deeply. Just tired, I told myself again. Got turned around in an unfamiliar house. I used the bathroom, changed, and got into bed, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. As I reached to turn off the lamp, I glanced up at the ceiling. The pattern was back, clearer now, definitely writing of some kind, in characters that seemed to shift and change even as I looked at them. For a moment, they almost resolved into something I could read, something that seemed important. Then my eyes were closing, sleep claiming me before I could even switch off the light. The dream came again. The endless hallways, the whispering in the walls. But this time, there was more. As I wandered the impossible architecture of Dream Blackwood Manor, doors began to open, revealing glimpses of scenes I somehow knew were from the past. A Victorian-era family dinner, the table laden with food, faces turned to stare at me as I passed. A woman in 1920s dress, weeping at a window as rain lashed against the glass. A man who looked disturbingly like my father poring over books in the library, making notes with frantic energy. And in every scene, somewhere in the background, the same tall, thin figure I'd glimpsed in the mirror, watching, always watching. I woke suddenly, the bedside clock reading 3:17 a.m. again. The witching hour. The lamp was off, though I didn't remember turning it out. The whispering was back, louder now, not coming from the walls this time, but from directly outside my bedroom door. Multiple voices speaking urgently in words I couldn't quite make out. I lay frozen, afraid to move, afraid to draw attention to myself. The doorknob began to turn slowly, deliberately, then stopped. The whispering ceased abruptly. After what felt like an eternity of silence, I heard footsteps moving away from the door, fading down the hall. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat up in bed, lamp on, jumping at every creak and groan of the house until dawn light began to filter through the curtains. As the room brightened with daylight, my fear began to seem foolish. Old houses make noises. Drafts move doorknobs. Dreams feel real when you're in them. I showered and dressed quickly, eager to get downstairs, where the house felt less threatening somehow. In the kitchen, coffee was again brewed and waiting. This time, I didn't question it. The caretaker was clearly coming and going, perhaps when I was asleep or exploring other parts of the house. After breakfast, I decided to try something. I would leave, just drive into town for a few hours, clear my head, maybe find a cafe with Wi-Fi so I could do some research on the Blackwood family myself. I collected my car keys and headed for the front door. As I reached for the handle, I felt it again. That resistance in the air, stronger this time, like pushing through invisible molasses. The door opened, revealing the porch and the gravel drive beyond, my car where I'd left it. Everything looked normal. I stepped forward and found myself in the library. I blinked, disoriented. Had I taken a wrong turn somehow? But no, I'd been at the front door, my hand on the knob, the door had opened before me. I turned around, half expecting to see the open door behind me, but there was only the library wall, lined with bookshelves. "This isn't happening," I said again, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. I made my way back to the foyer and tried again. This time, as I opened the door, I moved quickly, practically diving through the opening, and emerged in the conservatory, startling a bird that had somehow gotten in through the broken glass of the ceiling. It fluttered away in a panic, disappearing into the upper reaches of the room. My breath was coming fast now, panic building. I ran from the conservatory back to the main hall and tried a different door, one that led to a side porch. According to my explorations yesterday, it opened onto the chapel room, the small pews standing in silent rows before a simple altar. I tried every external door I could find. Each opened to a different room within the house, never to the outside. Windows showed the grounds tantalizingly close, but when opened revealed only blank walls, as if the view were merely a painting. By midday, I was frantic. I tried breaking a window in a desperate attempt to create a new exit, only to find the glass unbreakable. A paperweight I hurled at it bounced off harmlessly. Finally, exhausted and on the edge of hysteria, I returned to the kitchen. On the counter was a new note. "Mr. Blackwood, I see you've discovered one of the house's peculiarities. Don't worry, it's temporary. The house is simply getting to know you. I'll return tomorrow as planned, after your third night. Then you'll understand everything. In the meantime, I've prepared lunch. E.F. Getting to know me. What did that even mean? And how did Fletcher know what was happening? Was he watching me somehow?" I crumpled the note and threw it across the room, then immediately retrieved it, smoothing it out to read again, looking for any clue I might have missed. There was nothing, just the maddening message and its implication that all of this was normal, expected. Lunch was indeed waiting in the dining room. Another excellent meal that I ate mechanically, barely tasting it despite its quality. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. The house wouldn't let me leave. Somehow, it was manipulating space itself, redirecting doors and windows, perhaps even altering its own layout. If I hadn't been experiencing it myself, I would have said it was impossible. But what about the car? Could I reach that? I'd seen it through the windows, still parked where I'd left it. After lunch, I made my way to the front door again, this time with a plan. I would keep my eyes fixed on my car and run straight for it, not looking away for even a second. Whatever trick the house was playing, perhaps direct focus could overcome it. I opened the door, spotted my car, and sprinted forward. I made it to the bottom of the porch steps before the world seemed to tilt sideways. There was a disorienting moment of vertigo, and then I was standing in the upstairs hallway, facing the locked door I discovered on my first day. The one that had seemed to bleed. As I watched, stunned, a dark liquid began to seep from around the edges of the door, pooling on the floor. Not blood this time, something darker, thicker, with a smell like wet earth and decay. I backed away, turned, and ran down the stairs, through the twisting hallways that seemed to rearrange themselves as I passed, until I found myself in the library again. It was my refuge now, the most normal feeling room in this nightmare house. I sank into a chair, breathing hard, trying to think. If I couldn't leave, what were my options? Wait for Fletcher to return after the third night, as he promised. Try to find another way to contact the outside world. The landline phone. I'd used it yesterday to call Hammond. I made my way to the alcove where the phone was located. It still had a dial tone. Relief washed over me as I dialed Hammond's number again. It rang, but this time there was no answer. Just endless ringing until finally I hung up. I tried again with the same result. Then I tried dialing 911. More ringing, no answer. Random numbers yielded the same. Endless ringing, never connecting, never even reaching a number not in service message, just the hollow sound of a call going nowhere. By evening, I had tried everything I could think of. Breaking windows, looking for hidden passages, even trying to dig through a wall in a less visible part of the house, using a fireplace poker as an improvised tool. The wall material turned out to be impossibly hard, the poker bent before making even a dent. Defeated, I returned to the kitchen to find dinner waiting. A pot roast with vegetables, perfectly cooked, still hot. As if mocking my predicament with its domesticity. I ate because I needed to keep my strength up, then took the remaining whiskey bottle to the library. If I was trapped here until tomorrow night, I might as well try to distract myself by reading more about the family whose house had somehow imprisoned me. The Blackwood family history was where I'd left it. I poured a generous drink and began reading from where I'd stopped, determined to find some explanation for what was happening. The more recent sections of the book were sparse on details but rich in implication. Reading between the lines, it seemed the family had experienced a series of tragedies over the past century, accidents, illnesses, disappearances, always reducing their numbers generation by generation. There were oblique references to the house's needs and the price of prosperity. One passage stood out. The agreement made in 1842 upon completion of Blackwood Manor has served the family well. Wealth, influence, and longevity beyond normal measure have been our reward. The cost, while significant, has always been borne with dignity by those chosen to pay it. Agreement. Cost. Chosen to pay. None of it made sense. Yet all of it filled me with deepening dread. I read until my eyes grew heavy, the whiskey taking its toll. Despite my fear of what might happen while I slept, I couldn't fight exhaustion any longer. I made my way back to the master bedroom, finding it easily this time, the house apparently done with its spatial games for the moment. As I prepared for bed, I noticed something on the dresser that hadn't been there before. A small leather-bound book, much like Elias's journal, but older. The leather was cracked with age. I opened it carefully. The pages were yellow, the ink faded but still legible. It was a journal as well, but much older, dated 1842 and signed by Thaddeus Blackwood, who must have been the original builder of the house. The entries were mostly about the construction of Blackwood Manor, with detailed notes about materials, costs, and design choices. But scattered throughout were stranger passages. Morgan continues to press for more unusual elements in the design. The proportions he insists upon defy conventional architecture. Yet when I see the plans complete, they possess a disturbing harmony. And later, The foundation stones were laid today at the precise arrangement Morgan specified. I know not why certain angles and measurements matter so greatly to him, but he assures me it is essential for what he calls the thinning of barriers. The final pages contained the most disturbing entry of all. It is done. The house is complete, and with it, our pact. Morgan has revealed his true nature at last, though I suspected it long before. Not human, this architect who designed our home. Something older, hungrier. But the bargain is struck and cannot be undone. Prosperity for the Blackwoods for as long as the bloodline continues. In exchange, the house will take one of us once each generation. A single life to feed whatever lurks behind the walls Morgan has made so carefully thin. God forgive me for what I've brought upon my descendants. I write this as warning and confession both. The house must always have a Blackwood within it, and sometimes it will keep one forever. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. This was madness, a fairy tale written by a man perhaps driven to delusion by the stress of building such a grand home. It couldn't be real. Yet it matched everything I'd experienced. The house that wouldn't let me leave. The whispering in the walls. The spatial impossibilities. And tomorrow would be my third night. I placed the journal back on the dresser and got into bed, certain I wouldn't sleep. But exhaustion claimed me quickly, dragging me down into darkness. The dream was different this time. I stood in the library, but it was transformed. The walls had become transparent, revealing what lay behind them. Not wooden studs and plaster, but a vast, shifting space, like looking into a stormy sea made of darkness. And moving through that darkness, shapes, immense forms that hurt my eyes to look at directly, geometries that shouldn't be possible, folding in on themselves in ways that made my mind recoil. In the center of the room stood the tall, thin figure I'd glimpsed before. Closer now, I could see it wasn't human, though it wore the shape of one like an ill-fitting suit. Its face was blank, except for a mouth that opened vertically, revealing teeth arranged in concentric circles. The last Blackwood, it said, its voice the same whispering I'd heard in the walls. How fitting that the line ends with one who doesn't even know what he is. I tried to speak, but couldn't find my voice. The figure moved closer, its movements too fluid, as if its limbs had extra joints. Your great-uncle lasted longer than most. Nearly 60 years he kept us fed with small offerings. Animals, mostly. The occasional trespasser. But in the end, even he had to pay the full price. It reached out a hand that elongated as it moved, fingers stretching impossibly toward my chest. Tomorrow night, you will understand everything. Tomorrow night, you will meet what lives behind the walls. What has nourished your family's fortune for generations. What now hungers for the last Blackwood. Its fingertip touched my chest, right over my heart, and pain exploded through me. I woke screaming, clutching at my chest. There was no wound, no mark, but the pain lingered, a phantom echo of the dream. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Again. Something was different about the room. The ceiling pattern was fully visible now, no longer hiding itself when I looked directly at it. And I could read it somehow, though the language was like nothing I'd ever seen. It spoke of hunger and patience, of a bargain nearing its conclusion. I got out of bed, no longer able to stand being in that room with those words looming above me. The house was quiet as I made my way downstairs, the hallways behaving normally for once. In the library, I built a fire and sat before it, watching the flames and trying to make sense of everything I'd learned. If there was any truth to Thaddeus Blackwood's journal, to my dream, then I was in grave danger. The house, or something within it, intended to take me tonight, as it had apparently taken one Blackwood from each generation before. But why me? I still didn't understand my connection to this family. How could I be a Blackwood when I'd been raised by Jonathan and Marie Blackwood, who, as far as I knew, had no connection to this place or its dark history? As dawn broke, I made a decision. I would make one more attempt to leave, not by the doors or windows, which the house could control, but by a more direct route. I would break through a wall. The basement seemed the most logical place to try. Foundation walls, while stronger in some ways, wouldn't have the same finishing materials that had defeated my earlier attempt with internal walls. I searched the house for tools, eventually finding a utility room off the kitchen with a promising selection. I took a sledgehammer, a crowbar, and a shovel, and made my way to the basement door. It opened easily, revealing stone steps leading down into darkness. I found a light switch at the top of the stairs, illuminating a large, unfinished space below. The basement ran the full footprint of the house, divided by stone support columns but otherwise open. The walls were stone as well, massive blocks fitted together with expert precision. But in one corner, I noticed what looked like a newer addition, a section of concrete, perhaps from a repair. That would be my target. I worked through the morning and into the afternoon, pounding at the concrete with the sledgehammer, prying at cracks with the crowbar. It was exhausting physical labor, but the material was yielding, slowly. By mid-afternoon, I had created a hole about a foot in diameter, revealing soil beyond. Hope surged through me. I could dig my way out, tunnel under the foundation if necessary. I was about to start widening the hole when I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. I spun around, crowbar raised defensively. A man stood at the foot of the stairs, watching me with an expression of mild interest. He was middle-aged, well-dressed in a suit that looked too formal for a caretaker, with graying hair and sharp features. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice the same as the one I'd heard on the phone. "I see you've been busy." "Hammond." I lowered the crowbar slightly. "What are you doing here? Where's Fletcher?" He smiled thinly. "Edward Fletcher is a convenient fiction, I'm afraid. A name I use when corresponding with Blackwood heirs. It creates a certain distance, useful in situations like this." "Situations like what? What's happening here? Why can't I leave this house?" Hammond, or Fletcher, or whoever he really was, approached slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "That's quite a hole you've made. Impressive. But I'm afraid it won't help you leave." He gestured at the opening I'd created. As I watched, the concrete began to flow like liquid, sealing the hole as if it had never existed. You see, Blackwood Manor doesn't work like other houses. It was built with a purpose beyond mere habitation. "What kind of purpose?" I asked, though I was beginning to fear I knew the answer. "A transaction," he said simply. "A trade. Prosperity for the Blackwood family in exchange for certain considerations." Thaddeus Blackwood's journal mentions something like that. A pact. But it's nonsense. Houses don't make deals. This one does. Or rather, what lives within it does. Hammond moved to one of the stone columns, running his hand along it almost affectionately. "You felt it, haven't you? The whispering. The way the spaces shift. The watching eyes." I said nothing, which he seemed to take as confirmation. "Tonight is your third night, Mr. Blackwood. The terms of the agreement will be fulfilled. I'm here to explain what that means for you." "I'm not staying another night," I said, my grip tightening on the crowbar. "I don't care about the inheritance. I don't care about this house. I'm leaving, and you're going to help me." Or what?" Hammond asked, sounding genuinely curious. "You'll attack me?" "I assure you, that would be a mistake." His form seemed to waver slightly as he spoke, like heat rising from pavement. "I am much older than I appear, Mr. Blackwood, and far less substantial than you might think." To demonstrate, he passed his hand through the stone column beside him as if it were made of smoke. I stumbled back, crowbar clattering to the floor. "What are you?" "A facilitator. A caretaker, in the truest sense of the word. I maintain the balance between the Blackwoods and the entity that dwells here. I have done so since Thaddeus first made his bargain." "You're saying you're over 180 years old?" "Time works differently for me." He smiled again, showing too many teeth. But we're not here to discuss my nature. We're here to discuss yours, and your place in all this. I'm not a Blackwood, I insisted. There's been some mistake. My parents were Jonathan and Marie Blackwood, but they had no connection to this place. Hammond's expression shifted to one of pity. Oh, Mr. Blackwood. Thomas. Your parents weren't Jonathan and Marie Blackwood. Those people adopted you as an infant, with no knowledge of your true parentage. Your real father was Jonathan's brother, William Blackwood, the last direct descendant of Thaddeus. And your mother. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Your mother was a woman William met during his time here at the manor. A woman who was not entirely human. What are you saying? My voice had dropped to a whisper. I'm saying, Thomas, that you are more connected to this house than you realize. Half Blackwood, half something else. The perfect vessel for what comes next. Which is what, exactly? I demanded, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. The entity that dwells here has sustained itself on Blackwood offerings for generations. Animals, mostly. The occasional sacrifice of a family member when necessary. But it grows hungry for more. And the Blackwood line has dwindled to just you. The last heir. Half human, half, not. A bridge between worlds. He approached me slowly. Tonight, you won't be sacrificed, Thomas. You'll be transformed. The entity will take up residence within you, merging your consciousness with its own. You'll become the new guardian of Blackwood Manor, ensuring the pact continues even though the Blackwood bloodline ends with you. And if I refuse? Hammond laughed, a sound like glass breaking. You misunderstand. This isn't a choice. It's your inheritance. The true inheritance, not the money and property that were merely bait to bring you here. I'll fight it, I said, picking up the crowbar again. Whatever this thing is, I won't let it take me. You're welcome to try, Hammond replied, unperturbed. Many have, over the years. None have succeeded. He glanced at his watch. I'll leave you now. When night falls, the process will begin. I suggest you spend your remaining hours coming to terms with your future. It will be easier that way. He turned and walked up the stairs, his form rippling slightly with each step, as if he were a reflection in disturbed water. I stood in the basement, crowbar clutched uselessly in my hands, as darkness began to gather in the corners of the room. The hours that followed were a blur of desperate attempts and growing dread. I tried again to break through the walls, to find some escape route, even to set fire to parts of the house using kitchen matches and furniture as fuel. The flames simply wouldn't catch, sputtering out as if the air itself rejected them. As evening approached, I made one last attempt to call for help, using the landline again. This time, when I picked up the receiver, the whispering voices I'd heard in the walls emerged from it, louder now, almost comprehensible. I slammed the phone down and retreated to the library, my designated sanctuary. If I was to face whatever was coming, I would do it there, surrounded by books and knowledge, not cowering in some corner. I built a roaring fire, found the sharpest letter opener I could to serve as a makeshift weapon, and waited as darkness fell. At first, nothing happened. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 8, then 9, then 10. The house remained quiet except for its usual settling sounds. Then, at exactly 11:17 p.m., the fire in the grate extinguished itself, plunging the room into darkness. The whispering began immediately, surrounding me, coming from every wall, from the floor, from the ceiling, no longer muffled or indistinct, but clear. Thousands of voices speaking in unison. Last heir. Bridge between. Vessel for what comes. The temperature dropped dramatically, my breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. The bookshelves began to warp, wood twisting and bulging as if something behind them was pushing through. And then the walls opened. Not like doors or windows. They simply ceased to be solid, revealing the same vast, shifting darkness I'd seen in my dream. The same immense shapes moved within it, folding through dimensions that hurt my eyes to perceive. From that impossible space, the tall, thin figure emerged, the not quite human shape I'd glimpsed before. Up close, I could see that what I'd taken for a suit was actually its skin, stretched too tight over a frame that wasn't built for it. Its vertical mouth opened, concentric rings of teeth gleaming wetly in the darkness. "Thomas Blackwood," it said, its voice the source of all the whispering. "Last of your line. First of what comes next." I backed away, letter opener held before me in a shaking hand. "Stay back. Whatever you are, whatever you want. I'm not giving in without a fight." The thing that looked like a man tilted its head at an impossible angle. "Fighting changes nothing. The pact must be honored. You are the vessel, prepared through generations of careful breeding. Half human, half us." "I'm not one of you," I insisted. "I'm human. Your parents were not your parents," it finished for me. "Your true father was indeed a Blackwood. But your mother was one of us, wearing human form long enough to conceive you. A seed planted. A plan set in motion decades ago when we foresaw the Blackwood line fading. It moved closer, its limbs too fluid, its proportions changing subtly with each step. You felt it all your life, haven't you? The difference. The sense that you didn't quite belong in the human world. The dreams of places that cannot exist. The knowledge that came without learning. And I had. Strange dreams all my life. Intuitive understandings of complex concepts that should have been beyond me. A perpetual feeling of being slightly out of sync with everyone around me. That was our gift to you, the thing continued. Preparation for this moment. For ascension. You mean possession? I spat. You want to take me over? Use my body? No. Not possession. Union. I am what you might call the guardian of this threshold. The intermediary between your world and ours. For nearly 2 centuries, I have maintained the boundary, kept the hungers of my kind in check, directed them toward the offerings provided by the Blackwoods. But I grow weary. It is time for a new guardian. It reached for me with those 2 long fingers. You, Thomas. The perfect bridge. Human enough to maintain physical form in this world, but with enough of our essence to channel the powers required. You will become me, and I will become you, and together we will be something new. The pact will continue, but changed. Evolved. Its fingers were inches from my face now. I swung the letter opener in desperate defense, but it passed through the creature as if through smoke. There is no escape, it said, almost gently. No way to break the pact. But there is transcendence. Power beyond anything you've imagined. Knowledge of realms humans can only glimpse in their most fevered dreams. And the cost? I managed to ask, still backing away, though I was running out of room. Your humanity. Or rather, the illusion of it. You were never fully human to begin with, Thomas. You were made for this. Its hand finally reached me. Cold fingers touching my forehead. The world exploded into fractals of sensation and knowledge. Memories not my own flooded through me. Centuries of watching, waiting, the slow, careful manipulation of the Blackwood bloodline. The hunger of the things behind the walls. The desperate bargain of Thaddeus Blackwood to save his failing fortunes. I saw the truth of what I was, what I had always been, a construct, a hybrid created for this exact moment. And I saw what waited beyond the walls of reality, vast intelligences existing in dimensions humans couldn't perceive, feeding on consciousness itself, restrained only by the pact and its appointed guardian. Join with me, the thing whispered, its voice now inside my head. Become the new guardian. Maintain the balance. Or refuse, and watch as the barriers fail completely, releasing what waits beyond into your world. It wasn't a choice. It had never been a choice. I stopped resisting. The creature's form dissolved into mist that flowed into me through every pore, every breath. Knowledge and power flooded my system, changing me from within. I could feel my perceptions expanding, new senses awakening, my understanding of reality shifting to accommodate perspectives that would have driven my purely human mind mad. The transformation wasn't painful, but it was comprehensive. When it finished, I still looked like Thomas Blackwood on the outside. But inside, I was something far more. I could see the house now for what it truly was, not just a building, but a carefully constructed intersection point between dimensions, its strange angles and proportions creating a thinning in the barriers between worlds. I could feel the hungers pressing against those barriers and knew how to channel and direct them. And I understood my role. The guardian. The keeper of the pact. The one who would ensure that what lay beyond remained beyond, in exchange for power and knowledge no human was meant to possess. Hammond, or whatever his name truly was, appeared in the doorway, watching me with knowing eyes. "It is done, then," he said. "Yes." My voice sounded strange to my ears, layered with harmonics that hadn't been there before. "And your decision?" I considered. I could feel the full weight of the pact now, the responsibility it entailed. I could also feel the alternative, what would happen if the barriers failed completely. The thought was unacceptable. "I will maintain the balance," I said finally. "I will be the guardian." Hammond nodded, satisfied. "Then Blackwood Manor is truly yours now. In every sense. And you are its." "What of the outside world?" I asked. "My former life. It will be taken care of. Records altered, memories adjusted. Few will notice your absence, and those who do will find reasonable explanations. The solicitors will manage your new financial affairs. I will continue to serve as intermediary when needed. And I stay here. Forever. The house is part of you now, as you are part of it. You may leave the grounds for short periods as needed, once you've learned to control your new nature. But yes, this is your home now. Your domain." I nodded slowly, accepting the inevitability of it all. "Then I have preparations to make. Things to learn." "Of course." Hammond bowed slightly. "I'll leave you to it. Call when you need me. I am always nearby." He left, fading from view before he reached the hallway. I stood alone in the library. No, not alone. Never alone again. The house thrummed around me, alive with presences I could now perceive clearly. The barriers between dimensions remained thin here, but controlled, channeled through my new awareness. I approached the window and looked out at the night-darkened grounds. My grounds now. My domain. My prison and my throne. I was the last surviving heir of the Blackwood line. And the house wouldn't let me leave, not because it was holding me captive, but because I had become the house itself. Its guardian. Its soul. Its purpose. The pact would continue, but on new terms. My terms, as much as possible. And perhaps, in time, I would find a way to change the nature of that pact altogether. After all, I was something new, neither fully human nor fully other. A bridge between worlds. For now, though, I had much to learn. I turned from the window and walked deeper into the house that was now an extension of myself, whispering voices welcoming me home.